In 1967, a man escaped justice due to lack of evidence. What happened next was never written in court records, but everyone involved remembers how it ended. Before this story is over, you'll understand why people from that town still lower their voices when the year is mentioned, and why some roads remain empty long after the sun goes down. The town itself looked harmless, almost forgettable. One main road, a diner by the highway, a factory that dictated the rhythm of daily life, and rows of modest homes where generations stayed put because leaving felt riskier than staying. People believed they knew one another, not deeply, but enough to feel safe, enough to assume the worst could never come from someone familiar. She worked the late shift at the diner. Early 20s, quiet, reliable, never late. Co-workers trusted her without question. She saved her tips in a jar and talked about leaving town someday, usually while wiping counters long after midnight. Most people smiled when she said it. Few ever left. The night she disappeared started like any other. The diner closed just after midnight. She finished her routine, locked the door, and stepped into the cool air outside. The bus stop was a short walk away. She had made that walk hundreds of times without fear. That night, a car slowed beside her. A man she recognized leaned out and offered her a ride. He wasn't a stranger. That mattered. He had lived there all his life, fixed engines, helped neighbors, attended church often enough to be known, kind of men people waved at without thinking. She hesitated for only a moment before getting in. She never made it home. When she didn't show up the next morning, her family assumed she'd stayed out late. By evening, concern set in. By the second night, fear took hold. When her body was found just inside the woods near an old service road, the town lost something it never fully got back. The woods weren't deep, but they were thick enough to swallow sound. There were signs she fought back, torn clothing, bruises, marks that told a clear story without providing clear proof. It had rained hard that night. Evidence washed away. Footprints dissolved. Anything that could have ended the story cleanly was erased. Everyone knew who had last been with her. He admitted giving her a ride. Said he dropped her near the bus stop. Said she was fine when he left. There was nothing left that could prove otherwise. The trial came quickly, too quickly. Evidence was deemed inconclusive. A witness who had spoken confidently at first suddenly wasn't sure anymore. Another moved away before testifying. No explanations were demanded. The town trusted the process because challenging it felt dangerous. The verdict was not guilty. The man stood, straightened his jacket, and walked free. The victim's family didn't cry. They already knew how this would end. That night, the town felt heavier, not louder. not quieter, just unfinished. The man didn't sleep. He later told someone he heard movement in his house. Slow footsteps, careful ones. Like someone learning the layout. He searched every room. Nothing was missing. Still, the feeling stayed. Weeks passed. He stopped going to church, stopped helping neighbors. People saw him standing in his yard before sunrise, staring toward the woods. When someone asked what he was looking at, he said, "I keep seeing her." Others began having trouble sleeping too. The witness who changed her testimony woke nightly, convinced someone stood at the foot of her bed. The dream was always the same. The woods, the dark. Something behind her that she couldn't turn to face. A juror heard knocking every night just after midnight. No footprints. He stopped answering. The judge requested a transfer. Never said why. Looked thinner each time someone saw him. Avoided eye contact. Avoided the town. No one compared notes. They didn't need to. The man's behavior worsened. He missed work, lost weight. Neighbors heard him arguing with empty rooms, whispering apologies. Police were called one night after reports of screaming. They found him alone, shaking, repeating, "I didn't mean for it to go that far." The first death came quietly. A juror collapsed from sudden heart failure. No prior condition. The town attended the funeral, unsettled but silent. Soon after, a man known to have suppressed evidence died in a late-night crash. His car left the road and entered the same woods. No skid marks, no attempt to brake. That was when people stopped pretending. Parents kept children close. People avoided the woods. Conversations ended when the case was mentioned. The man locked himself inside his house, windows covered, phone disconnected. Neighbors said he slept facing the wall, afraid to turn his back on the room. Years later, police found him dead in his bed. Eyes open, heart stopped. Ruled natural causes. No autopsy. One officer said the body was facing the wall, as if watching something until the end. The nightmare stopped after that. The town slept again. Justice never returned to the courtroom, but it arrived anyway. If you believe some crimes don't end when the court says they do, subscribe to Midnight Revenge Tales. Some stories don't fade. They wait. The days after the verdict moved slowly, as if the town itself was reluctant to continue. People still went to work, still greeted each other at the store, but conversations felt careful. Eyes lingered too long. Smiles came late, if at all. No one said the man's name unless absolutely necessary, and even then, it was spoken quietly, like saying it too loudly might invite something unwanted into the room. The victim's family remained in their house with the curtains drawn. Friends brought food they barely touched. grief settled into them differently. There were no outbursts, no public anger, just a silence that felt heavier than shouting ever could. They knew what the law had decided. They also knew the law had not told the whole truth. The man tried to resume his life. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. He returned to work for a few days, then stopped showing up consistently. When he did appear, he looked distracted, hollowed out, like someone constantly listening for a sound only he could hear. Coworkers noticed his hands shaking when he held tools. He flinched at sudden noises. Once, when a car backfired nearby, he dropped to the ground without thinking. At night, his house stayed lit, every room, all hours. Neighbors passing by saw his shadow move from window to window, never staying still for long. He rearranged furniture repeatedly, dragging chairs and tables across the floor as if trying to block something from moving freely. Still, whatever troubled him seemed to follow. He told one person that she stood at the end of his hallway. Not every night, just often enough that he could never relax. He said she didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. When he approached, she was gone, but the feeling she left behind stayed. The town doctor noticed a pattern forming: insomnia, panic attacks. Each case traced back, one way or another, to someone involved in the trial. No one made the connection official. No one wanted to. The woman who altered her testimony stopped leaving her house after sunset. She nailed her windows shut, slept with a lamp on beside her bed. When her sister visited, she found scratch marks on the bedroom door, clawed from the inside, as if someone had tried desperately to get out. The woman claimed she didn't remember making them. Another juror began drinking heavily. He said the silence was unbearable, that it felt like the town was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable. He claimed he heard footsteps behind him whenever he walked alone, matching his pace exactly. When he turned around, nothing was there. Months passed. The man grew thinner. His face sharpened. His eyes sank into dark hollows that made him look older than his years. He stopped answering his door, stopped answering his phone. Food deliveries went untouched on his porch. Sometimes neighbors heard him sobbing through the walls. Sometimes they heard laughter instead, sudden and panicked, like someone losing control. One night, a scream cut through the town. Not loud, not drawn out, short, final. Police arrived within minutes. They found him sitting on the floor, back against the wall, arms wrapped around his knees. He looked up at them with terror and relief tangled together. "She's closer now," he said. There was no one else in the house. After that, the deaths began to feel less like coincidences and more like a sequence. Another juror collapsed at work. Another witness was found unresponsive in their sleep. Each case had an explanation: stress, health issues, accidents, reasonable answers that failed to explain the timing. People began avoiding the old service road entirely, even during the day, even with company. The woods felt wrong, too still, as if they were waiting for something or someone to return. The victim's mother was the only one who seemed at peace. She walked the town every evening, head held high, eyes clear. When someone finally asked her how she managed it, she said, "I know she didn't leave alone." The man spent his final years sealed inside his house. Curtains rotted from never being opened, paint peeled. He slept less each year, afraid that closing his eyes meant letting his guard down. When police found him dead, there were no signs of struggle. Just a man who looked like he had been waiting for something to finish. His eyes were open. His body was still. The wall he faced was scratched, faint lines running down the paint, as if something had been traced there over and over again. After his death, the disturbances stopped. Nightmares faded. People slept through the night again. The woods felt quiet in a way that didn't threaten. No official record connects what happened after the trial. But the town remembers, because justice didn't come from the courtroom. It came from somewhere else. And when it arrived, it didn't ask for permission. Years passed in a way that felt uneven. Some months crawled, others disappeared entirely. New families arrived, unaware of what had happened before them. Old families stayed quiet. Stories were softened, then shortened, then left unfinished. Still, certain habits remained. People crossed the street without realizing why. They avoided eye contact near the woods. They locked their doors at night. Children grew up hearing warnings that sounded like superstition. Don't walk there after dark. Don't take rides from anyone, no matter how well you know them. Don't trust familiarity. Parents never explained where those rules came from. They didn't need to. Fear had woven itself into daily life, subtle but persistent. Every few years, someone would claim they saw a woman near the old service road, always at dusk, always from a distance. She never approached, never called out. She simply stood there, waiting. When people looked again, she was gone. Law enforcement dismissed it as imagination, stress, memory playing tricks. The town didn't argue. The factory eventually closed. The diner changed owners. The highway expanded. Progress passed through without stopping. But the road by the woods stayed the same. No new signs, no lights, no development. Contractors refused the job without giving clear reasons. Equipment malfunctioned. Workers quit abruptly. Projects stalled and were quietly abandoned. One man, decades later, tried to investigate the original case. He wasn't from the town. That was his mistake. He requested records, spoke to former residents, asked questions no one wanted to answer. People warned him politely at first, then firmly, then not at all. He stayed in a nearby motel. One night, he told the clerk he heard someone walking outside his door for hours. Slow steps, pausing, resuming. When he finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. He left town the next morning without checking out, never published his findings. Those who remained believed the story was finished, that whatever balance had been disturbed was restored. They didn't celebrate it. They respected it. Some things they believed were not meant to be examined too closely. The victim's grave was always clean. Flowers appeared without explanation, sometimes fresh, sometimes dried. No one ever saw who left them. The caretaker stopped asking questions after he noticed footprints that led away, but never toward the site. Old age claimed the last people directly involved. One by one, they passed quietly, often in their sleep. No more nightmares, no more whispers, just an understanding that the debt had been paid in full. The town never put up a memorial. It didn't need one. Memory lived there without stone or plaque. It lived in what people avoided, what they never said, and what they still felt when the night grew too quiet. Some stories end with justice served in courtrooms, written neatly into public records. Others end differently. They linger, they wait. And when the law fails, something else steps in to finish the job. That's why this story was never written down the way others were, because everyone involved knows how it ended, and they know it wasn't over when the verdict was read. If stories like this stay with you, if you believe some wrongs don't disappear just because time passes, subscribe to Midnight Revenge Tales. Not every truth needs a courtroom. Some truths find their own way. Always remember,